Good evening and welcome to the February 13th, 2018 meeting of the Montgomery County Historic Preservation Commission. And this is a meeting that was rescheduled from the canceled meeting on February 7th. My name is Bill Coburn. I'm the chair. I'm going to ask my fellow commissioners and staff to introduce themselves, and I'll start on my left with Commissioner Arkin.
Richard Arkin, Gaithersburg.
Marcia Barnes, Bethesda.
Kenneth Firestone, Tacoma Park.
Sandra Heiler, Brookville.
Eliza Voigt, Bethesda.
Philip Estes, Historic Preservation Staff.
Michael Kine, Historic Preservation Staff.
Dan Bruckert, Historic Preservation Staff.
Thank you. The first item on our agenda this evening are the historic area work permits. Have the work permits been duly advertised?
Yes, they were noticed in the January 24th edition of the Montgomery Sentinel.
Thank you. And if anyone was here to testify and to provide testimony and you are not the applicant for any of these cases this evening, please make sure you give a speaker form to staff and they'll get that to us. So we make sure we call you when we're ready for your testimony. We're going to begin by expediting the cases that we believe can be expedited based on the staff reports. And on that note, I am going to recuse myself and I'll return after these first cases are heard.
Is anyone here to speak in opposition to case number 1C at 11 East Lenox Street, Chevy Chase? Case number 1D at 19 Grafton Street, Chevy Chase? Case number 1E at 6 Hesketh Street, Chevy Chase? Or case number 1F at 115 Elm Avenue, Tacoma Park?
Madam Chair, hearing none, I move that we approve the following historic area work permits in accordance with the staff reports based upon the record before us and in consideration of recommendations of the local advisory panels and including any recommendations made by staff. Case number H35/13D, I beg your pardon, case 35-13-18D at 11 East Lenox Street in Chevy Chase. Case number 35/13-18E at 19 Grafton Street in Chevy Chase. Case number 35/13-18F at 6 Hesketh Street in Chevy Chase. Case number 37/03-18H at 115 Elm Avenue in Tacoma Park.
Is there a second?
I second the motion.
All in favor, please raise your right hand. The motion passes unanimously. So those cases are all approved. If you have any business, if you have any questions, you can speak to staff tomorrow during regular business hours. We appreciate your work to preserve your properties and working with staff to submit easily approvable work permits. The chairman has returned.
Thank you, Vice Chair. The first case we're going to hear this evening is case 1A at 10201 Menlo Avenue in Silver Spring. The staff report.
Yes, we do. This is previously postponed hop for 1021 Menlo Ave in the Capitol View Historic District. You can see the district is sort of Y-shaped. The star represents the location. The Capitol View Historic District divided the resources into 4 categories based on age. They do not actually designate different levels of review based on the time period. So as you can see, the vacant property with a red dot is the subject property. It is surrounded on 3 sides by other buildings. In the southeast corner is the 1895 house that was originally this was originally a portion of. To the southwest, there's a 1993 building. All along Loma, which is the east-west street, there are 1953 houses. To the north is a 1989 house. across Menlo Ave is actually outside of the historic district. Additionally, to the east of the subject property is also outside of the historic district. In 1985, the planning board subdivided the large lot into 6 different parcels to what we see today. There's the original plat. So up along Menlo Avenue, there are a variety of houses. They're largely Victorian in nature. Many were constructed in the 1920s. There's some infill from the 1980s, and then what you see is the subject lot. This was taken, I believe, in October when everything was largely overgrown before the leaves changed. Basically to the left of where the garbage cans are is where the proposed entrance to the lot will be. And this is looking into the lot now. So these were taken in January. You can see up on the rise is where the proposed construction is. Lot's largely overgrown, a fair amount of change in elevation. There's significant debris in a conservation easement area in the lot. And there's a spring house. This is it was hard to tell if this was on the 10201 property or the adjacent property. However, this is outside of the limits of disturbance, so we're not really concerning ourselves with this. But neighbors have raised concerns about the impact. Again, this is outside the limits of disturbance for the proposal. So the applicant has conducted a tree survey. They've identified 11 trees that are within the development area. 9 of them will need to be removed. Their species are identified. As you can see, the first 4 are where the only location where a driveway can be on the lot. So if any access to the lot has to be provided, those trees will need to go. There are also significant building limitations on the site, as there is the large conservation easement is in green, and there are storm drain easements and water easements and sewer easements, leaving only a 5,160-foot buildable envelope on the lot, and that's sort of in the southwest corner of the lot. So the applicant's proposing to construct a single-family house. This is a previous version. The applicant's revised some design elements in it. And the standards of review are the Capital View Historic District Guidelines, Chapter 24A8, and the Secretary of the Interior standards, particularly the ones related to new construction, which are standards 9 and 10. Just want to point out special considerations. We don't see Chapter 24A8C very often, where it's not the intent of this chapter to limit new construction, alteration, or repairs to any one period or architectural style. Additionally, 24A8D states that it's the case of an application for work on a historic resource located within a historic district, the Commission shall be lenient in its judgment of plans for structures of little historical value or design significance, or for plans involving new construction, unless such plans would seriously impair the historic or architectural value of the surrounding historic resources, or would impair the character of the historic district. So this is the current design. It's basically a 2-story rectangle. There are bay windows on the first floor. It's a side gable house with 2 front-facing gables. The house will be clad in hardy plank siding with shingles in the gable, hardy shingles. The right elevation, which is south-facing, includes the garage, which is sort of why the garage roof is at a 14/12 as opposed to the 8/12 of the main roof ridge. This is the left elevation. It's largely blank. And then the rear, the applicant is proposing to put a deck on the rear that's not included in the elevation drawings to better show the basement level. So this is an architectural perspective provided by the applicant showing what you would see from right at the corner of Menlo and Loma Avenue. The house is plainly visible. The garage is partially obscured. You can see in this drawing the steep elevation slope down as the lot moves east. And the applicant's provided a landscape plan. You see a large driveway and parking area. Because this building site does not provide any street front parking, the applicant's indicated the need for off-street parking on the building site, and that's where he's coming from with a 1-car garage and additional parking location in front of the house. The deck will be built on stilts, proposing to use a wolf rail, which is a metal rail, and then the fencing that they're proposing on site is a vertical privacy fence. It will range between 6 feet and 48 inches, depending on where it's going to be located on the site. And previously, the HPC asked for a streetscape study to be performed. The applicants provided that. This shows the spacing and height of a variety of the 3 houses on Menlo Ave. You can see that Menlo Ave slopes down gently as it goes from north to south. So the spacing, much to the north, which is to the left of your drawing, is relatively consistent with close setbacks and pretty consistent heights. As you get to the space between 10205 and 10203, it grows to 38 feet between the houses. And then the space between 10203 and the proposed house is actually 60 feet from the wall plane to wall plane. The applicant was also asked to provide some details regarding the size and scale of the proposed house compared to what's around and adjacent. So, you know, the breakdown of these numbers is generally the house is pretty consistent with the amount of impervious surface. You're seeing about 14%, give or take, of impervious surface for the proposed lot. The surrounding lots vary from 10% all the way up to 29%. So this is generally consistent with the surrounding area. And just as this is an aerial showing the outlines of the surrounding houses, and just based on appearance, the footprint of this building doesn't seem out of character with the surrounding neighborhood. So based on the information provided, staff finds the proposed construction is generally consistent with the surrounding houses under 24A8B2. Again, the house will be a 35-foot by 36-foot rectangle with a side gable roof, 2 front-facing dormers. The revisions that we see to the previous submission are minimal. They include the bays. They've gone to a 1/1 window from a 2/1 window, and then the treatment of the front-facing gables has changed. Massing and form have remained unchanged. Staff supports approval of the design based on 24A8C and D. And further evaluating what else has been allowed for infill in the district, there's a collection of houses along Leafy Avenue, which is south of the subject property. Side gable houses with additional front gables. This image was taken from Google Street View in 2012. And the nice thing about it is the landscape has grown up around it, and it now feels like it's much more part of the district, where it seems sort of like a clear landscape right now. Again, site work, 9 trees are proposed for removal. Due to the limitations of the building site, staff finds that a denial of the tree removal would deny the applicant any reasonable use of the property, which is what's outlined in 24A8B5. And the tree canopy ordinance for the county requires that 9 trees be planted on the site or money paid in lieu of planting. Staff has spoken with the applicant, and the applicant would like to plant as many trees as will fit. He believes that 9 may be too many. He's here and may be willing to respond to that. And I've encouraged him to reach out to neighbors to discuss the species and placement of these new trees. Again, significant paving because of limitations for street front parking and building placement. The parking area will be minimally visible from the public right-of-way because it is both below grade and set to the south of Loma and back from Menlo. Staff would be supportive of an alternative material like a porous pavement or pavers. Instead, the applicant proposes asphalt currently. Staff finds the application is the proposal is compatible with 24A and the Secretary of the Interior standards and supports approval. Again, there were several comments presented that had concerns about the massing of the design. The applicant provided several different configurations of the house and determined that an L-shaped plan or a T-shaped plan would not fit within the buildable envelope of the lot. And staff believes that the limited visibility from the public right-of-way will not significantly impact the streetscape on either Menlo or Loma within the historic district. There's been previous testimony submitted regarding water control measures for runoff and sediment control. These are not purview of the HPC, as all of the water control measurements will be below grade and will not be visible, so this is not a visible change for the district. Additionally, the sediment and erosion plan is required and will be reviewed by DPS prior to the issuance of any construction permits, so that again is not part of HPC's purview. Staff further believes that the materials that have been dumped in the lot will be removed, and that will improve drainage on the site. And are there any questions for staff?
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the streetscape diagram that you gave us earlier, can you tell me the construction date for the houses on that street?
So 10203 is 1989. 10205, I believe, is 1926 or 1929, and 10207 is another house that was constructed in the 1920s. I believe I have that on an earlier slide. There we go. So yes, that was correct.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
Any other questions for staff?
I have one question. At the end of the conservation easement on the lower portion of the lot, I believe it actually comes, and you see it in the plan you just had, it comes up to another street, and I'm not sure the name of that street. Is it in the historic district?
So the rear property boundary is the terminus of the historic district. So if you're looking at the current plat, on the right side, what is labeled Loma is outside of the district.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? If not, we invite the applicant, please come forward. We can give you.
Mr. Chairman, as the applicant comes up, I just wanted to let the commission know that our timer is not working.
Yes,
so staff will be, oh, you got it?
Well, I'll run one too. Why don't we both run one and we'll
Great, thank you.
compare notes. So we can give you 7 minutes for your testimony. Thank you.
Okay. My name is Minner Farnsworth. I'm the applicant. I would like to reiterate everything that your great staff did. I agree with their recommendations, and I see we have a lot of people to talk, so I'm going to turn it over to you guys to bring them up.
Okay. Before we let you go back to your chair, anybody have any questions for the applicant before we excuse him? Oh, great. Thank you very much. Please have a seat. And I'm going to bring up people in groups of 4. So if we could have Carol Ireland please come up. I think it's, sorry, is it Tully Lehman? Johannes Stickleth? And Kirsten Fidian-Stegun. And I'm going to start with Ms. Ireland, and we can give you 5 minutes for your testimony. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Carol Ireland. I live in Capitol View Park, and I'm co-chair of the Capitol View Park LAP, and have served in that capacity since the inception of the historic designation for our neighborhood, which was in the early 1980s. In 1980, Royce Hansen, who was then head of Park and Planning, visited our neighborhood and recommended that we apply for historic designation because ours is a unique neighborhood which has a rustic flavor, open spaces, and shows the progression of architectural styles in Montgomery County. Thus, we became Montgomery County's first historic district. Over the years, HPC has helped support us to maintain this uniqueness. Differing support has been given to the sensitivity of design, maintaining open space and support of environmental settings, and massing of footprints. Some of the examples are HPC required that the final house constructed on one of our neighborhood streets, which was Meadowneck Courts, cul-de-sac, that house be of a smaller size to transition from the large neighboring homes to the smaller homes which are typical of Capitol View. Also, HPC required the developer, in another case, of the Trimble Estate, which is one of our very historic, outstanding resources, to leave a Victorian vista in front of the existing historic house instead of surrounding the historic house with 4 new structures, which was originally proposed by the developer. Last night, I attended the meeting of the Capitol View Park Executive Committee to explain the proposed new building to them. Like the LAP, they're concerned with the large footprint and the impact on the environmental setting. I explained that the LAP is deeply concerned about this third application for a new structure. This third application is substantially identical to the first and second, despite the fact that the commissioners expressed serious concerns regarding the scale and massing of the footprint of this house. And this was at the hearing on the 25th of October. Mr. Arkin stated that he felt the house was too big to be compatible with the rest of the neighborhood and that it's a very aggressively designed house. Other concerns voiced were in regards to the construction on the house of a steep slope which comes down from the street, down and the ravine. The staff acknowledged at the hearing that most houses in the Capitol View area are fairly modest in size and have relatively small footprints. The exceptions in size, as this house, are set on larger lots than the configuration of this lot. The LAP agrees with neighbors that the lot in question is not configured to accommodate, and we understand that, a house of the size currently proposed, but would be far better served by a structure with a much smaller footprint and a more modest height, such as a bungalow, which is not uncommon in this area. Such a revision would go a long way in addressing not only concerns about the compatibility of the proposed house with its neighbors, but would help alleviate the threat of significant damage to the surrounding environmentally sensitive landscape. Because of these issues, the LAP and the Civic Association hope that you will support our desire to maintain the rustic appearance of our unique and historic neighborhood. We would ask that you require him, the developer, to downsize the scale and height of the proposed house to lessen the impact of this house on the fragile environmental setting. Thank you very much for listening to me. Over the years, and it's been a few years since 1980, I've been impressed with the challenging issues that come before you all and how you're able to help our county maintain its historic features. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Ireland. And let's reserve our questions until all 4 speakers have talked. Thank you. Ms. Tully Lehman, we can give you 3 minutes for your testimony.
Thank you for all the members of the commission. I would like to acknowledge that during the first...
You need to turn your microphone on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There you go.
Yeah.
And state your name.
Yeah, my name is Tovi Lehman, and I would like to thank the members of this commission to allow us to voice our concerns. So in October, my wife and I were here, and we have voiced 2 primary concerns. We are in the house just above, over the slope to this current proposed building. We are already experiencing substantial erosion. And we are also concerned about some of the big trees that are in the very border of our property and this proposed plan, we can see two inevitable outcomes. That this large impervious area that is going to be landing after removing all the existing vegetation, plus the removal of other absorbing soil that is part of the construction plan, would have to result in drastic change to this area and to the surrounding properties. And this to us is not only an erosion general problem, but a problem to the historical value of our and related properties, which we are part of and would like to preserve. Second, we are really concerned that some of the trees, due to the big driveway and the compaction of the soil, could literally fail. And this is part of the recommendation of the Bartlett Tree Report. So I'm not so sure that few of the large boundary trees would withstand the time, and I could imagine that if they fail, it would very likely result in a loss of life, not only a loss of injury. There are huge trees that are there. So we believe that by a different plan with a strong erosion control a plan in place, we can protect all of that, and without it, we will be very vulnerable to, events that could be much bigger than us. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Mr. Johannes Stagun, please.
My name is Johannes Stagun. I'm also a neighbor there. I would like to begin with, I think everybody realized the fact that the house has not been reduced in size. It actually is a little bit bigger because it now has bay windows. Also, unfortunately, the same applies to the driveway. The first thing I wanted to point out, and I can refer to what Carol said, this is really the street view that we see. So one of the big arguments that the staffer has made why this house should not be so closely looked at its style and its appearance was that in the staffer report it says that it's 25% visible. As you all can see, this is almost 100% visible. And the other thing is, this is the view you get when you come down from Loma. So this will be the most prominent house in Menlo Avenue. Everybody who walks down or drives down looks at this house when they look straight, not when they look to the side as with all the other ones. The second thing which I find very important is that this street view also really shows how out of character this house will be and even the planned property. This is how it looks right now. This more looks like a country house. Carol just said rustic style. Where's the rustic style anymore? So I think it is extremely out of character, and therefore I think what the staffer just read, that if there is severe impact on the appearance, then that your commission should act, and we try to keep our houses also. Another thing that the staffer pointed out was this analysis that the builder provided. If you should have that in written form. I submitted that in January, and so I went through the numbers. The best numbers I could go through is because our property is there. Every number on our property, 10203 Menlo Avenue, is wrong. The square footage of the house is 1712, not 1992. The square footage of our driveway is 893, not 1190. The total square footage of impervious surface, the way that the builder has added up the numbers, is wrong because he added the area of our porch, which actually is sitting above impervious surface. And therefore, to add these numbers was incorrect. It's correct in his case. And so this results actually that the percent of the total impervious surface of our house is 8.8% and not 14.68%. I think this is very important because the last meeting was canceled because you said you didn't have information that would allow you to make a good decision here. All indications I have are that the numbers that the builder has supplied to us, at least in the case where I could verify them, are wrong. So I ask you, which numbers do you want to believe? And that is a grave concern to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Kirsten Fidian Stagun?
Yep. This is how, so you can see in the
You need to state your name for the record before you speak. Just hand us these, and you can just go back to your seat. State your name for the record. Thank you.
Your name.
Okay. My name is Kirsten Florian Stagun. I'm a neighbor also. And okay. We are now presented with a streetscape, a 3D color drawing and landscape treatment plan, which doesn't change the fact that today's proposal is still deficient of important modifications requested by the commissioners during the October hearing. For Commissioner Arking, the proposed building is, quote, aggressively designed with very tall roof dominating the lot, having a powerful impact on the rest of the streetscape. Quote end. Regardless of this and many other concerns of the Commission, footprint as well as mass of the building have not at all been downsized. An erosion and drainage plan, a proper tree removal and protection plan, nor a stormwater runoff plan have been provided, all of which are essential parts to protect this environmentally so very sensitive lot and prevent erosion, our biggest concern. The provided landscapes plan gives the impression that none of the existing trees in the non-conservation area will actually be preserved. A clear explanation is desperately needed. In our opinion, the proposed landscape design is completely out of character. As the 3D color drawing proves, contrary to the staff report, page 3, paragraph 1, the building will not only be 25, but almost 100% visible from the right-of-way. Therefore, the west and north elevation should have a coherent aesthetic relation. To the east, the building evolves into a 3-story massive structure with a height of 42 feet, which would dramatically be visible from the lower part of Loma, Leslie Street, and the historic area, including the Hahn House and neighboring properties on Barker and Menlo. The impression here would be far too overwhelming. Our community finds that regarding 224AA, the proposed building would have a serious impact on the environmental sensitivity as well as the historic and architectural character of this area. We agree with the Commission and the LAP that the oversized footprint and mass of the building with the added garage would not fit into the historic Menlo streetscape. Historic requirements should not differ regarding a building's location inside a historic district. Only most minimal changes have been implemented since October. Windows from 2/1 to 1/1, which is no improvement at all, quite the contrary. Window shutters that actually were a pleasant feature have been eliminated. Second, 2 added gable embellishments don't really turn the design more towards Victorian as requested by the Commission. The west elevation received 2 additional bay windows, which instead of downsizing the mass, would optically enhance it. These minimal changes neither eliminate the, quote, mishmash style, quote, end, criticized by the commissioners, nor comply with their request to pay more attention to design and offer more creative solutions. Leafy homes, as shown by staff via Google Earth photo, are not comparable with Menlo Avenue's very unique character. Just one more sentence. Given the fact that the commissioners generously granted a second, basically third opportunity to the builder to modify, downsize, and beautify his design, 4 months should have been plenty of time. Not only in my opinion, I'm also speaking for members of our community who were unable to come tonight. The current proposal should not be accepted. Thank you.
Thank you. If you all could just stay seated for a second. Anybody have any questions? Any of the witnesses? If not, we want to thank you for coming out this evening. We appreciate your testimony, and we'll take it into account. Thank you. The next 4 speakers to please come up are Catherine Laurie. Is there a Catherine Laurie in the audience? Okay. Linda Beamish.
She's going to come later. She has to work, but you put her at the end.
If we're still taking testimony at that time. Emily Volz, please come forward. Lynn Bush. Harry Volz. And Eugene Washington, please. Ms. Volz, we'll start with you and give you 3 minutes for your testimony. Thank you.
I'm Emily Volz. I live at 2801 Barker Street.
Microphone needs to be turned on. State your name for the record.
I'm sorry. Emily Volz. I live at 2801 Barker Street, which was the original house on the bigger property before it was subdivided. I have some concerns about the integrity of the design. I think that in an historic district, we should be able to expect that the house will have massing and elevations all around that give it a character that has integrity rather than having some kind of mess on the side, and the front is, all this stuff, and then the side and the back and the other side are just very undifferentiated and don't have any character at all. They look like this stuff that's going up near the subway up at Glenmont, in fact. And if you look at Menlo Street, the houses there have projections, and they have porches, and they have various different things coming along so that you don't see a flat facade anywhere except on the new house. There are no other flat facades along there. It's a different character. I'm also concerned about him comparing it to Leafy and about the staff comparing it to Leafy. Leafy is probably one of the least successful new areas in all of Capitol View Park in terms of fitting in. It's all the houses look they're cheesy looking compared to the original and historic houses because they have a crummy plywood siding, and the colors are they're too different from each other, so it looks sort of like a pastiche. And to me, it has never been a successful thing. And I go on Leafy Avenue quite a lot. What attracted me to the area was when I first drove in, the first time I ever drove down Capitol View from Forest Glen, I was like, where am I? This is a really wonderful rustic area here. And I wanted to live there. And we were lucky to get a house there. And I just find it disturbing that people don't have to put up something, that aren't going to be required to put up something that has a character of its own all the way around the house rather than just on the front. And then I also disagree with the imperviousness of my driveway. We had the impervious driveway removed, and we now have a pervious driveway all the way around, all the way down. And our driveway is 200 feet goes from 200 feet down to the house, and it goes around a circle and back up. And so that's a lot of square footage, and it's all pervious because we had so much flooding at the entrance to the house with the old driveway, which was there when we bought the house. And I believe that's everything I have to say.
All right. Thank you very much for your testimony. We'll now hear from Eugene Washington, please.
Yes, good evening, members of the commission. First of all, my name is Eugene Washington. I am a retired civil engineer, having 38 years of construction experience, on which I had to go before the National Capital Planning Commission, Commission on Fine Arts, and the State Historic Preservation groups such as yours, but with the various municipalities. I don't want to belabor what has been said here. I do believe that more information is needed before you make a decision on this. As I was reading the staff's report, under the approved sector plan, they classify this as nominal, but as I read it, it's spatial because there are unimproved parcels here that add to the historic significance of Capitol View. I'm mainly concerned with the post-construction here. Like I said, I think the community has echoed the concerns, and I know that this committee is not prepared to make decisions based on engineering, but I'm just asking that you really, really consider what they're saying. I think it needs more further study. After all, this is Montgomery County's first historic district. In my experience, I had to defend the the Department of the Navy against historic districts, and it was hard, but at least we, complied. One of my main projects was the 8th Street view from Eastern Market. I don't know if you can see where the Navy Yard is. The Marine Barracks was built there. And one of the things that we had to make sure was that view of 8th Street was there, because that was the original location of the Eastern Market. But due to flooding, they moved it up to Pennsylvania Avenue, but we still maintain that view shed. And, well, if the Department of Navy can do this, then why can't Montgomery County do this? So I thank you for this opportunity to share this, and I would really like to see more further study being done with this.
Thank you, Mr. Washington. Harry Volz.
Thank you very much. My name is Harry Volz. I'm also a resident neighbor of the proposed house. I will probably be belaboring some of the things that have already been said, but I want to say them anyway. First, I don't think any of us dispute the right to build a property that he has bought and owned, but the design, as we've said over and over again, is not in keeping with the neighborhood. It looks like it comes off of an internet drawing or something like that. And it seems unfair that he can hit and run. He can drop it in our neighborhood and then go away and not be a part of it. This is a very vibrant neighborhood that's been a wonderful place to live for 20 years, and a house like this is not really in keeping with that. And the last thing I would say is with regard to statistics, as someone once said, there are lies, damn lies, and statistics. What I think we found out here is that there are the statistics that we've seen may be right, may not be right. So it seems if that's the case, we ought to investigate further. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Waltz. Any questions for the witnesses? Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. Jumped the gun. Ms. Bush. Yes.
Good evening. I'm Lynn Bush from 2905 Barker Street. This developer has failed to comply with commission requirements. First, there's no tree protection plan. At most, he's given a commitment to staff to plant a few trees, and even that promise is nullified by staff allowing the option of a fee payment in lieu of trees. Additionally, the footprint comparison provided was misleading and non-responsive. There's no true representation of how the proposal compares to proximate surrounding homes. Instead of providing statistics on houses facing up and down Menlo and Loma Streets, the developer cherry-picked 5 unrepresentative houses, only one of which was actually on Menlo. The others are in removed locations on Barker Street. To even get to these homes, you have to travel up to the end of Menlo, go 1 block down Grant Street, and finally turn and go another block down Barker. The developer avoids listing the numerous modest houses populating Menlo and Loma Streets closest to the proposed house. Comparing this proposal to the 5 selected houses is a false equivalency, since the configurations are nothing alike. The Menlo lot is long and narrow with an unusable bottom third and with the house squeezed in. The other 5 lots are more square-shaped with proportionate homes surrounded by spacious grounds. The proposed house is simply too big for the narrow lot and too tall for the streetscape. Scale and massing threaten significant damage to the surrounding environmentally fragile landscape. The developer should be required to downsize both the scale and height of the proposed house. Unlike this developer, who simply wants to turn a quick profit and has no ties to Montgomery County, we are Montgomery County residents vested in this community. We ask the Commission to hold the developer accountable and to protect this historical, environmentally delicate location. Finally, this developer should know that if he builds as proposed, we neighbors will retain the transcripts to these hearings, having them at the ready to present as proof in any claims arising from consequential foundation or flooding problems experienced by any buyer or neighbors. These transcripts will show the developer was repeatedly warned and therefore had a duty to inquire. And as an experienced contractor, he knew or should have known of the damage a house of this size is likely to cause given the fragile environmental setting. Mr. Farnsworth is on notice and will be unable to claim ignorance, unforeseeability, or latent conditions as defenses under these circumstances.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Appreciate it. Any questions for the speakers? If not, I want to thank you for your testimony and for coming out this evening and sharing your thoughts with us on this case. We will take it into account. Moving on to our next group, is there Margaret Turner here? Yep. If you please come forward. Blair Turner, please. Catherine Laurie. And is Linda Beamish here?
She's on her way.
All right, we'll start with Ms. Turner. If you please state your name for the record before you speak. Thank you.
With your permission, I'd appreciate if you let my husband speak first. He
That'd
has
be
a
fine.
disability
Yep.
and...
Mr. Turner?
Okay.
Go right ahead.
My name is Blair Turner. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here and to present our comments on the proposed construction. My spouse, Margaret, and I live in a Victorian-style home situated on one of the lots separated from the original Han 1870-1916 contributing resource parcel located at 2801 Barker Street. In order to cover as much as possible in 3 minutes, I will read my testimony. As described in our October 24th, 2017 written testimony submitted to this HPC Commission, we continue to be at a loss to understand why HPC staff does not designate this property as a number 1 1870-1916 protected category instead of their nominal designation. On page 1 of this application, staff lists 10201 Menlo in the contributing resource category consistent with a number 1 historically protected 1870-1916 Victorian period standard. Yet in the text, the staff switches this property to the nominal protected category with no sufficient basis. According to the approved and adopted sector plan for Capitol View, this lot was part of the original Han 1870-1916 contributing resource property, giving it a higher degree of architectural and historical significance. Indeed, this proposed construction is adjacent to and viewable from the Han house at 2801 Barker. Additionally, all the other houses built on lots split off from the original Han 1870 parcel were required to meet the Victorian standard instead of the nominal one, except for one, namely 2905 Barker, which is the only one of these newer constructions not viewable from the street. For these and the other reasons named in our October 25 written testimony to this commission, we believe Mr. Farnsworth's new construction proposal should require the number 1 Victorian period design standard, which allows for early bungalows, common to this period as well as to this historic area, or other 1870-1916 period architectural designs. For complete rationale on this issue, please refer to our October 2017 written testimony.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Ms. Turner?
Yes, my name is Margaret Turner, as he referred to in his introduction, and I also will read it to get as much in as I can in the 3 minutes I'm allowed. Thank you for letting us voice our concerns. Noteworthy, this proposed construction has a larger footprint than all the street visible Victorian period homes approved by HPC for lots split off of the original 1870 to 1960 Han parcel. In addition to the Victorian period 1870 to 1916 standard, we ask that the HPC commissioners require Mr. Farnsworth to significantly shrink the footprint of his proposed building driveway parking lot in order to put this project more in harmony with the conservation easement, this environmental setting, and the adjacent neighborhood homes in this historic district. Based on our calculations, we disagree with staff's slightly larger nomenclature and as a considerable underestimate of the size, increase, and impact of this construction relative to the other Victorian-era homes near it. Rather, 10201 Menlo, as proposed in this large house garage driveway, is crunched into a tight buildable space close to the street, higher and larger than its immediate neighbors, making it discordant with the surrounding environmental setting. In relative context, based on Mr. Farnsworth's standalone pictures and measurements with inadequate reference points, this proposed house seems to be a construction without a place in the setting, standing out as a sore thumb, tending to make a mockery of the Montgomery County Code and HPC guidelines. Under these applicable guidelines, we ask that the HPC require this new construction to blend into and enhance the historic neighborhood as opposed to the non-historic part. I won't go into the 25% visibility, street visibility issue because others have covered it, and it's also covered in our October 2017 written testimony that was submitted to this commission. Finally, we ask HPC to require a tree replacement plan with an accounting of trees that Mr. Farnsworth will put in place of the 11 or so trees which he wants to remove. What kind and size of trees will be planted, and where will they be located? In his application, the builder has displayed pictures of large trees around the house as tall as this proposed house. With this much ground disturbance and so many trees being removed, not to mention the tree root system of adjacent trees as well as those coming from the protected conservation area, which also will be affected, it is extremely important that the trees destroyed will be replaced as opposed to fines per staff recommendation should Mr. Farnsworth fail to replace the 11 trees. This is Mr. Farnsworth's third chance of scheduled hearings to provide the required information to this commission. Because of his reluctance to honor the commission's request, we ask that the commission kindly continue to oversee the builder by way of additional hearings such as this one to make sure that a specific 11-tree replacement plan is documented as described above vis-a-vis location, size, and type, instead of allowing staff final review with approval authority. We would like the opportunity to be a continuing part of this process as well. With a different, more compatible design.
Senator, you need to wrap up your testimony.
Okay, I will.
Time is up.
I will. And in much reduced scale massing, there are other solutions that would allow reasonable use of this property while protecting the integrity of its environmental setting. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Ms. Lowry?
Hi, Catherine Lowry. Thank you for allowing me to testify. I live at 10209 Menlo Avenue, so I am 4 houses down from the proposed development. And my house was built in the 1980s, and that developer was required, I presume, or simply did, a Victorian style. So it's a new house, looks new on the inside, but if you approached our house, there's a wraparound porch, there's all kinds of Victorian detail. I'm not an architect, so I'm not going to be able to elaborate with any more specificity than that. But it looks Victorian. I've had many people walk up and go, "Oh, you have a Victorian." And I'm like, well, sort of. We call it a faux Victorian because it looks Victorian. We also have 2 huge holly trees in the front of our lot. I don't know, 40, 50 feet tall. They're very old. The developer was required to build around them. So our house happens to be set back considerably more from the street than many others because of that. And we're thrilled that we've got these trees in our front yard and that they were preserved. So I'm very concerned that the plan for 10201 basically allows trees to simply be taken down. You know, I feel like the standards are not being kept up. When I looked at the photo or drawing, the drawing in the packet that Mr. Farnsworth submitted, I was shocked to see the image that was presented because it was so manicured looking. And I have to say, our street's not a very manicured looking street. It's just not. You know, people have, it's not the look at all. I mean, I almost laughed out loud because it looked like such a cookie cutter house from kind of any standard suburban place. It did not look like Capitol View. And I also would like to just reiterate what other people have already said, that the houses chosen for reference, the other newer development that are also sort of cookie cutter ones, it's like, yep, that's true, they're there and they're in the historic district, but they don't belong there either. And to me, that feels wrong that that should be the reference point. Really, it should be the houses that truly fit the historical style should be the reference point for what is appropriate for 10201 Menlo. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions for the speakers? All right, and we'll give one last call out for Ms. Beamish. Is she in attendance? Okay. I don't have a speaker form for anyone else. That's all the speaker forms I have. Very good. Elena Stagun. Please state your name for the record.
Hi, I'm Elena Stagun, and I'm also a neighbor. So, can I start?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to voice my concerns today. I wanted to start off by saying that I've grown up in Capitol View Park my entire childhood. It truthfully has shaped the person I am today. My backyard was the place where I discovered my love for nature and the outdoors. This passion is exemplified by the fact that I chose to study evolution and ecology as a future career path. I spent countless hours debating with peers and professors about the importance of the natural environment, especially long-standing trees as a carbon sink and as a counter for erosion. I'm truly scared for my future when I'm told by well-renowned ecologists that developed countries must reduce their carbon sink in the hopes to counter the undeniable future development and modernization of the developing world. I've always taken pride in my state and my county for being progressive regarding these concerns, and to witness the destruction of a beautiful natural ecosystem, home to a variety of wildlife right in my backyard, would be absolutely devastating. Some specific examples of the destruction I speak of include the loss of families of foxes, raccoons, deer, rabbits, squirrels, turtles, and countless species of birds that have taken safe haven in this stretch of land, all of them feeding from the little creek that's crossing our yard. One of my fascinations about Capitol View Park is the historical spring house that is located directly adjacent to the property of 10201 Menlo Avenue. To me, it will always be a witness of our past and of a simpler time where all the people from the neighborhood went to gather water. Now that sadly the time seems to have come for this little paradise to make way for the proposed development, I'm concerned about how much of it will be destroyed. The immense building and driveway are bad enough, but what worries me most is how the builder would get all the heavy equipment on the lot to dig out more than 10,000 cubic feet of dirt on such a steep ravine. This canopy is even difficult to find any form of a path to walk through. I'm living witness of that. It makes no sense to me how we will be able to preserve the trees and bushes that I and all the people here today have worked tirelessly to protect. I'm pleading you to take into consideration that the builder, with getting approval, would build an enormous box on this environmentally sensitive piece of land without knowing the environmental outcome, sell it, and walk away. Whereas we all, my neighbors, my parents, my sister, the children we will have, and all the people who walk through the neighborhood because of its unique character would have to live with the consequences for the rest of our lives. We will have to endure the view of this massive structure with all four of its unpleasing and unpleasantly designed sides, visible from all parts of the historic district surrounding this precious piece of land. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions for the speaker before we let her go? All right. Thank you very much for coming out tonight. Appreciate your thoughts on the case. All right. Does anyone need to hear from the applicant?
Mr. Chairman, before we enter into deliberations, I have a question for you or for staff that was raised about trees. And in my experience, the tree replacement programs that we see are usually generated by a community. The town or the area has a requirement. I'm not aware of what our authority would be to impose a tree replacement program, and I was wondering about that.
As far as I know, we have no authority to impose a tree replacement program. Only the county or the local community.
I just wanted to clarify that because I'd heard a number of people talking about it. And
Staff have any additional?
I mean, and
Comments on
this, the applicant can speak to the specifics of this because he's been dealing with the county and the ins and outs. There is a county tree canopy ordinance. The applicant, my understanding, is required to plant 9 trees based on the county requirements or pay a fee in lieu. There is no requirement from the county either way. However, staff's finding is that based on the character of the site and the character of the district, the maximum number of trees should be planted that can be accommodated on that site.
But that has the HPC staff acting in an advisory capacity to the county, which has the authority to require the planting.
Well, the county has established a floor, which is paying a fee in lieu, or a specific number of trees, in delegating to staff the authority to approve tree plants, species, and locations to better integrate the site and the loss of the trees into the surrounding district. So this would be keeping the character of the site consistent with the surrounding district.
It's condition 2 of the staff report.
Yes.
Commissioner Fires?
It's my understanding that we can grant or deny approval for removing a tree above, beyond a certain size, which I believe is 6 inches at DBH. So conceivably, we could deny removing some or all of these trees if they are of that critical size.
Well, correct. The identified trees for removal, the 9 that were presented, are all above 6 inches. Anything less than that, the applicant does not need to get HPC approval for. So, you know, based on the limitations of the site and the access, it's staff's opinion that denying the ability to remove these trees would deny the ability to develop the site and would contravene the ability to make adequate use of the site.
Commissioner Arkin?
This is a question for staff also. Could you explain why you have identified the site as being a nominal resource rather than a spatial resource? Or is it a spatial resource now and the proposal would be for something that would make the property a nominal resource?
So what you see before you is the original and only survey of the Capitol View Park Historic District. This was done, I believe, in 1978, prior to the district's designation. The environmental setting of 10201 Menlo was part of the Hahn House, a 19th century Victorian house. Then, in 1985, the Hahn House and its environmental setting were subdivided, and what you see in this pink trapezoid was created. So all of these lots were created out of that, and the 2 in the lower left, those 2 houses were constructed in 1987, so shortly after the redevelopment. The house on the northern end of the trapezoid was constructed in 1989. The house in the middle was constructed in 1993. So this is the only lot of that 1985 subdivision that hasn't been developed since then. So in staff's opinion, or based on the record, when this lot was developed, it was associated with a 19th century house. The environmental setting no longer exists, and it's an undeveloped lot, which then puts it into the nominal spatial designation. Be that as it may, the Capitol View District, unlike Chevy Chase or Tacoma Park, does not give varying levels of scrutiny to apply to different lots. So regardless of whether it's a 19th century Victorian or a 1940s bungalow, it is supposed to receive the same level of review using both 24A and the Secretary of the Interior standards.
And would you, or can you, actually, could you go back to the subdivision slide? for a moment.
The subdivision side, or?
The one that was in the designation plan.
Oh, sorry, the Capital View survey.
Yeah, the survey, I'm sorry, the approved historic district. Is the star obscuring the lot, or is the lot part of the?
That is the location of, I mean, the star is covering both 10201 and the access point to 10203.
And 10201 is shaded how?
It's black.
It's black.
I mean, again, if you look at the trapezoid that's created by that, it is the same trapezoid shown here.
Okay. And do we, this is a buildable lot, which,
yes.
And this, the zoning is by right zoning, is it not?
Correct.
So we do not have the authority to withhold approval unless the conditions in the ordinance are met. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, the review is done under Chapter 24A and the Secretary of the Interior standards. If the HPC does not find that the proposal meets those criteria, then they could add conditions to bring it into conformance or deny it. If they find that it meets those criteria, then approval is in order.
And in 24A D, the commission is required to be lenient in its judgment of plans for structures of little historical or design significance, or for plans involving new construction, unless the plans would seriously impair the historic or architectural value of the surrounding historic resources. So in with this application, the commission is required to be lenient. Is that correct?
And in staff's interpretation of the chapter and as applied to this lot, yes.
And one other question. In your consultations, your meetings or conversations with the applicant, was there ever any indication on his part that he would be willing to change the design of the house to make it a more faux Victorian or traditional house?
Those discussions were not had with the applicant. The guidelines state explicitly that we are not to adhere to one specific architectural style or time period. Additionally, the Secretary of the Interior Standards for Rehabilitation argue that a false sense of history should be discouraged. So staff did not push the applicant into developing a faux architectural house for this lot.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff or otherwise? Yep.
Can you tell us off the top of your head what the distance between the proposed site for building this house is and the 1895 house that's the closest historic house to it?
It's between 150 and 160 feet.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions for staff?
Could I pose a question to the applicant?
Yes, we can bring the applicant.
Okay, thank you.
Please come forward.
Mr. Farnsworth.
Did you, at any point in your discussions with the community, express any willingness to change the concept of your proposed building to make it perhaps more compatible with the neighbors?
No, I have not discussed it with the neighbors.
Okay, and have you, so you are wedded to this plan, is that correct?
Kind of limited to a size, and we tried to get a T structure to fit. We tried to get an L structure to fit. We couldn't get that to fit. On the preliminary plan, it shows the garage is on the other side of the house, but that didn't work for the historic part, so we put it on the opposite side of the house, and it seems to work because there's plenty of parking now. There wouldn't have been parking if we'd put it on the opposite side of the house. And so we're kind of wed to what we've got right now.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant before we let him go back to his chair? All right. No, thank you very much for coming forward, answering that question. Let's move into deliberations. Anybody want to kick things off? All right, if not, I will. So I've listened very carefully and have taken a lot of notes, both from the LAP representative's comments as well as all the testimony that we heard this evening. I am really only swayed by one argument, well, two possibly. I'm in general agreement with the staff report. I think the staff report did a good job of analyzing this challenging situation with this property and the very eclectic nature of the district and the houses around this site. I am in support of that staff report and the two conditions stated. I feel there ought to be two additional conditions stated, added to the for approval. One is that the north and south elevations of the house should be brought into to a similar character to the front facade. Having visited the site today, I did find I believe the north elevation will be highly visible from Menlo, especially as you go up Menlo, make the turn and come back down. You're going to see that north elevation straight on, and there are sort of two characteristics of that elevation that troubled me. One is the lack of character detail to the trim around the windows, and also sort of the haphazard placement of the windows. In historic homes, really all sides of the house had stacked windows in most cases, except for special feature windows, very much like the front of this house has been designed. And I think that would be a great improvement, both to the north elevation, but also to the south, the garage facade as well, because that is facing the historic district. I mean, this is really already a condition in the staff report, but I think a tree replacement plan is very important for us to see. I think we're going to do as much as we have the authority to do to try to get as many trees replanted on this site as possible. And I think staff has appropriately put a condition on that to have this be reviewed at staff level. So I would be okay with those additional conditions at staff level approval for my approval of the case. Sure.
Well, thank you. I just want to thank the community. You came out here in force, and it sounds like the community means a lot to you, which means a lot to us. I also think that the staff did a great job of going through all the issues and really, really understanding to the best of our ability what's going on out there based on the guidelines that we are required as a commission to review. So as we stated, we have guidelines, we have to review the proposals. And it's very difficult because this is a beautiful green, environmentally sensitive lot, but it's also a buildable lot. So we are obliged to let people build on it based on the guidelines. So I agree with the staff report, and I think the commissioner, the chair, has a great point, and maybe we can even, in terms of the condition about the placement and species of new trees, and then maybe we can, say something about maybe somehow we can be more specific about, tying it into county guidelines or something, or what the actual requirement is. So I don't know if we can do that, but maybe we can look at that, because I also think that this is a very green lot. It's part of the character of the community, and that will help. Preserve the the historic character of the oldest historic neighborhood. All right, thank you.
Yes, I think I can agree that the community has a lot invested in this district, but the community is also very limited in the constraints that it can put on new development. And two considerations seem very important to me. One is that the owner cannot be deprived of fair use of his property. He wants to build on it. It's, there will be great limitations put on him by DPS when he goes for his permits, because DPS will be concerned and require that he deal with environmental damage, and that appears to be something that he can look forward to. The other is that we're required to review this in terms of its compatibility with the nearby or the neighboring historic resources. There's only one historic resource near this property, and it's 150 to 160 feet away. Given that, I'm in agreement with the staff's proposal and with the additional conditions that the chair has stated.
I still have some problems with this application. I agree with a lot of the things the other commissioners have said, but I really think that the size and massing of this house as proposed is not in keeping with the historic district.
I think that you see a difficult case. And I think you realize why, even though the subdivision occurred in 1985, this lot has never been built upon. It's a challenging lot. And as some of my fellow commissioners have pointed out, there are a number of steps that still have to be taken before construction can start. And those concerns that people have expressed about the environment, about erosion, are dealt with not by the HPC but elsewhere. We are enjoined to be lenient in our judgment for structures which are new, unless they would seriously impair the historic or architectural value of the surrounding resources. And as many of you have pointed out, Capitol View, part of its charm is that it's a very eclectic neighborhood. So the idea that somehow a faux Victorian should go in here is one that I would challenge. We deal with the information that is presented to us by staff, and according to that, this footprint is not out of proportion with houses elsewhere. I find that I disagree with staff's suggestion that it would only be limited in its visibility from the public right-of-way. And that is where my major concern occurs, because I feel that the plan as submitted comes across as too massive. Across the street, outside of the historic district, are a number of very small bungalows. On Menlo, you have a range. You have pseudo-Victorian. You have a nice sort of 1920s farmhouse. You have some bungalows. And this seems out of proportion to that side of the street, which is, in my understanding, in the historic district. Although I have to say I got a little confused about the district. So I have problems with this proposal as it's been presented, and I look forward to learning more about our authority regarding trees, because I feel very strongly about trees.
To begin with, I would like to compliment the community's interest and the intensity of its presentations. And there's a great deal of validity, I think, in the observations and that the community has made. However, it's our responsibility to respond to an application, to respond to a design, and not we cannot design what we think would be best for the lot. And in terms of compatibility, which is perhaps the most important aspect of what we have to do, I would agree with Commissioner Firestone that this is in form and massing and size. It certainly stretches the limits of compatibility. It would be my preference to make it somewhat smaller, or if the applicant is determined to build something of this size, that he do what's happened with architects and sometimes in just simply carpenter-built houses in the surrounding area, to add some interest in terms of three-dimensionality, particularly on the side elevation, which is most visible from the street. I agree with the commissioner that the house should be, that the sides of the house should follow the design or be similar to the design of the front of the house. Although I hope there won't be more bay windows added. The two bay windows, actually, I find rather unusual. And I think it's important to stack the windows. But adding, there are architectural tricks that can be used to make the size of the house less obvious, to minimize to eliminate the blank wall aspect of those two side walls, and to break up the mass. And I would like to see that in a final design of the house. I think we are, because this is a piece of land which is buildable, which means that the owner of the land has the right to build on the land as long as he or she conforms with the zoning and with this commission's requirements. But I don't think we are able to deny the application because of the requirement that we be lenient on this lot, and because I think it is a stretch to say that the house, if it's modified to make it less boxy, thank you, could be made to be compatible. And I would hope that the applicant will consult with staff as to how this can be done before staff approves the final design. I agree with the two additional conditions that the chairman has suggested, and tree replacement plan and the making the side elevations similar in concept to the front elevation, so the house does not appear as two different box designs. But I am disappointed with the house. It's not what I would want on that lot or in that neighborhood. But I don't think we have the right to deny it.
Take us off the historic list, our house. Silence, order. Right, the motion.
I move that we approve this application as stated with the conditions specified by staff and an additional condition as described by the chairman that the north and south elevations should be brought into character with the front facade by adding the necessary detail to the windows, stacking the windows, and otherwise removing their obviously haphazard placement.
I'll second the motion.
I have to abstain, Mr. Chairman.
Motion passes. I want to thank the community for coming out tonight and providing your testimony. We'll move on to the next item on our agenda this evening, which is preliminary consultations, case 2A. Case 2A, which is at 7714 Tacoma Avenue in Tacoma Park. 7-4.